Want to avoid fighting when you travel? Want to stop fighting over money when you travel? We have a few tips as 4 years of full-time travelers on how to avoid fighting about money when you travel. So we actually are going to do a 3-part series here, and it's all of our tips and tricks for how to communicate and how to have a better relationship as a full-time traveling couple traveling around the world. We are together 24/7, 365. It wasn't like that when we first launched. I mean, before we launched, Steve had his career, I had my career. In the evening, we would meet for dinner, chit chat for 20 minutes, go watch television, and the day was over. Now, not so much.
I think we had a little bit more intimacy than that. But since we have been traveling so much, it's great to share with you some of the tips that we have about how we manage money in our travels. And how do we come to some big decisions?
Right. So we've got a 3-part series. The first is about money. The second is about planning. And the third is about, you'll have to stay tuned because it's a surprise. We're going to bring in some friends to help us out with the third part of this series. So do us a favor, subscribe and click the like button or the alert button so you know when the next part of this series comes out. But we're going to start with the hard part, the money part. So before we left, we're a unique couple in that Steve had his money and I had my money. I mean, we talked about the big things like buying houses and cars and paying tuition and those types of things, but we didn't talk about the little things. I went to the grocery store, bought groceries. He went to the grocery store, bought groceries. It was like we really didn't talk about money.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it a lot. And we'll talk about how we plan for our budget for full-time travel. But I think the first thing that I just want to talk about is maybe a little story about it. It's not always about overspending that causes fights. We're going to start off with a little story about how we underspent. Yeah. And that caused a little difficulty. And I'm talking about a year ago when we were in Sydney, Australia. And I think we had a few days gap and basically just went to Airbnb, picked our days, sorted by lowest price to highest price, and just picked the one that was the cheapest one. And that's the one that we went with. Yeah. Well,
the situation in Australia, in Sydney particularly, was that anything in Sydney is super expensive. And so everything was over our budget. I mean, we have a budget of about $50, $60 a night or so. And Sydney was coming in at $100, $120 a night for the worst possible place. So anyway, we're like, it's only a couple days. We'll pick the cheapest one. And we picked it. And we go. And this was, not only was it the cheapest place in Sydney that was available, but it was the worst place we ever stayed in our 4 years of travel.
Yeah, it was the worst place. It was a horrible location. It was dirty. It was noisy. Just about anything that you can think of. They put us in the wrong room. It was really not good. And it was something that we really, by that point, didn't have a lot of choices except just to kind of tough it out and look at each other like this with like, oh, we could have spent a little bit more money.
And even what was bad about it is I had a kitchen. So we're like, we'll save some money by, cooking 3 meals or 3 dinners, whatever, in the kitchen. The kitchen was so gross, we ended up having to go eat out. So that just even made it more, fuel to the fire of we underspent, we underplanned, we under everything, and it just caused an over amount of friction and an over amount of angst.
Yeah. So you probably weren't expecting us to start with a story of underspending. So we could counterbalance that with an overspending. Yeah. And this is actually an issue that used to be an issue for me, but it's not anymore. And that is the amount of money that Chris spends on shoes. So she's got really great taste in shoes, really high quality shoes.
So when you're back in the days when he had his money and I had money, I would go off and I think for me, shoes are really important. Not the style of a shoe, the function of a shoe. I want a really good shoe that I can wear for a really long time and have a lot of comfort. And for me, that often is a shoe that's in the north of $150. Steve was going down to Walmart and buying a $20 pair of Keds or whatever, and they would fall apart 6 weeks later, and he'd be like, why is this happening? And my shoe could last a year.
Look, we're going to have this fight right now, right here about this. We're done with it. Really, we're done with that because I have seen the light, and I have discovered that what Chris discovered, that high quality shoes cost more money. Are they really? Are they? I don't know. They're worth it because my feet are important, and I don't have a lot of stuff because I'm a full-time traveler. Everything that I can stuff in my suitcase is everything I own, and shoes are really important. So I'm on the bandwagon, and I'm spending money for shoes, and this is not a problem anymore.
Yeah, and if you want our recommendations for gear and shoes, you can watch this video up here. But let's just take a break. Who are you? Who am I? What are we doing?
Oh, I'm Steve.
I'm Chris.
We're Eat, Walk, Learn, and we're happy to bring our travel stories to you and hopefully make your travel life a little bit easier.
Yeah, we left Denver in May of 21, and we've been traveling full time with 2 suitcases and a carry-on, or 2 carry-ons and a plan. It's the name of my book, 2 Carry-Ons and a Plan. We've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I'll follow up because Sydney was an example of, where we had accommodations that just did not meet our expectations. And we do have minimum expectations. And this is really helpful because if you've got different expectations with how you're going to travel and your travel lifestyle, there's going to be some friction and some problems, and it's going to cost more money. So
right.
When we talk about our minimum expectations for accommodations, it's not a 5-star hotel and a penthouse and a butler. Some people demand those things. We don't. We basically want a decent, bed, a good sized bed that's comfortable for the 2 of us. We want a private bathroom. We want a good location. We want safety. We like a kitchen, a washing machine. These are the kind of things, the filters that we put into things like places like Airbnb before we start making our selection.
Right. And the fact that we actually wrote down our minimum requirements for accommodation, which, sweetheart, is at least a queen bed.
At least a queen
bed. And we don't have to always have a kitchen. It depends on what our situation is for the night. But we wrote those down so that when Steve is looking for accommodation or I'm looking for accommodation and we have a list of 30 things, we can eliminate things that don't fit our requirement quickly, and we don't have to have a lot of conversation about it. I trust that when Steve picks a place or when I pick a place, it's going to hit at least our minimum requirement, which eliminates stress and trial tribulations about, I can't believe you picked this place. Well, I picked it because it meets our criteria and, whatever. Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing we communicate. We have these shared expectations. And so that reduces a lot of stress. And kind of related to that, as far as the money is concerned, is this topic of fast travel versus slow travel.
Right.
And, fast travel means, you're hopping from place to place every maybe couple of days, 3 days, maybe whatever.
Every week.
And so that means you're probably paying more. You're paying more for accommodations. And
but the reason why you're paying more for accommodations is because the longer you stay, the better rate you can get. We've talked about that in our accommodations video. So but really the reason why slow travel versus fast travel becomes more expensive is the travel part of it. Every time you move, you've got to pay someone to move you. Yeah. So whether that's an extra train, an extra plane, an extra cruise, an extra taxi, whatever, those extra transportation costs go on top of your base, because you got to pay for a hotel every night. So it doesn't matter if you're here or there, but it's the transportation that makes it more expensive.
And no doubt you're also going to be eating out more because you're on the move. You don't have a kitchen on those travel days in order to help prepare meals. So it's just all in all, it's going to be more expensive the faster you go and the faster you travel.
So to eliminate conflict and eliminate fighting about that, come to agreement about how fast you want to travel. Or for us, our pattern tends to be we go for a month and then we have 1 or 2 weeks that we fast travel, and then we go for a month and then 1 or 2 weeks that we fast travel. And that fast travel is we kind of pick up the things we maybe didn't do while we were slow traveling, or they're between position A and B. It's on the way. We're going from Athens to Barcelona. We're going to stop in Olympia for 3 or 4 days or whatever. So understanding what your pattern is and what your desire is for how fast you travel will really help eliminate stress and expectations on where you're going and how fast you're getting there.
Yeah. And there are also kind of related to that is, do you plan, or are there kind of like impulse purchases, one or the other, or both of you just going off and buying something and saying, "Oh, this looks good." And, Chris used the example of, buying a fancy dress or something that she saw at the mall. I use the example as I like to look at like camera equipment, and I get dreamy about this, $1,000 camera that I want. But we don't do those things. We
live a life without stuff, and to not only buy stuff and then have an impulse to buy stuff just completely contradicts our lifestyle, living light, traveling light, having a light footprint in the world, having lightness in our life. Impulse buys don't fit into that. But impulse buys of travel can fit into that. So like we'll see, or we'll talk to somebody and they'll say, "Oh my God, we went on the safari," or "We went to Uluru," or "We went to all these really fantastic places that maybe we weren't thinking about or didn't quite budget for." But all of a sudden Steve will come to me and will say, "What about a bike and sail ride on the bay and in Turkey on the Bay of Badova, and we will ride a boat and get off every day and do an e-bike ride. How's that sound, honey?"
Yeah, and there are a couple of times when we have, made this big purchase and then later, had to talk about it and had to say, "Wait a second, are we really committed to this?" Because it may cause a little friction, but it's a book that we read a couple of years ago when we first started our traveling called Die with Zero. Changed our feeling about money a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it kind of gave us more of freedom to maybe do some impulsive kind of spending or spending on things that we wouldn't normally think of being, yeah. I guess we're considered frugal travelers.
Well, you're frugal.
I'm cheap.
I'm not, and that could be a conflict too, right? How much you want to spend on something. But in relation to, what's funny about this particular issue with Die with Zero, reading Die with Zero and then buying the bike and sail. So we had read Die with Zero and we're like, okay, we're going to go spend some money. And then this bike and sail came along. We buy it. And it was like I think we bought it like 9 months before it actually occurred. And it was a lot of money. I mean, if you looked at our budget and what our monthly spend was and stuff, it was like, this is a lot of money. But we're like, no, Die with Zero. And then every time we had to make a payment over the 9 months, we had to go back to this conversation of, oh my God, are we really doing this?
Really spending this much money?
We still have 60 days before we can cancel. We can get all of our money back. Die with Zero. Okay, we have 30 days before we can cancel. We can get all our money back. Die with Zero. So this was a little bit of a conflict, and we went on the trip. We enjoyed it. You can see our video here about group tours. And what we found out after the fact was it wasn't a real good decision for us, because what we found out was that we really didn't enjoy being on a boat with 20 other people who were on vacation and in vacation mode and kind of were vacationers and not travelers like us. And I hate making the distinction between vacationers and travelers, because that's not, I don't want to, that's like a differentiation thing that I'm not trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is we were just living on the boat and we just would go for bike rides. People that were with us had really high vacation-oriented expectations, and their expectations kind of conflicted with our expectations. So when they wanted to stop in a tourist town and do all this tourist shopping and spend tourist money and go to the tourist place to have the tourist lunch, we're like, we're just going to go down here for $5 and get a euro, while everybody else is spending $50 for lunch. Yeah. So so what we realized, it was a real growth experience for us of, if we are going to do a Die with Zero experience and we are going to lay a lot of money out to do some sort of kind of impulsive thing, we really need to stick to what we like and what we enjoy and communicate and think about what that is.
Yeah. So, lessons for money, for spending money. We spend too much money, spend not enough money. The key is that we're talking about it. We're talking about our shared expectations and talking about, reflecting on, was that a good value or was not that not a good value? And we're actually getting better at it. We're getting better at how we spend our money and how we allocate our resources.
But the one thing, and this is the biggest tip of all for all of you all, is the one thing that really keeps us incommunicado and managing our expectations is we have a budget. And every year we sit down and we work on our budget. And you can look at our video here about how we put a budget together. What's important for us to tell you, and we hope you take away from us, is our budget isn't about finances. It isn't about, well, it is, but it isn't about what we can or can't afford.
Right.
I mean, it's within the realm. We can spend a lot more than what we budget, but the budget sets our expectations and our experiences for how we want to spend our money and how we prioritize spending our money. It's a control mechanism and an expectation mechanism. Yeah. And because Steve and I both know how much we're going to spend on accommodation, and how much we're going to spend on food and dining, and how much we're going to spend on entertainment each month, when it comes to deciding if we're going to do things, we can use the budget as a guideline to easily make the decision rather than having to arm wrestle and tussle over, well, I wanted to go out to dinner for $100, but you wanted to go on a cruise, a sunset cruise for $300. You know, it's easy for us to slice through all of that and easily come to an answer about what to do.
Yeah. And for me, I go back to a number of years ago before we even decided to do this full-time travel. And when Chris came to me with just kind of this idea and said, what if we each put $2,000 a month into a bucket and use that for travel and that kind of like, there was a lot of sparks about that, but I had this like number in my head like, can you really travel the world for $2,000 a person and have all these amazing experiences and do these incredible things? And the answer is yes, you can.
Well, and we haven't given ourselves a little bit of a raise since we first started.
We have, and we have recognized that there is inflation, and we've changed our travel and our expectations a little bit, but we talk about it, and we accommodate for that in our budget, and we track it. So every month, we look at our spending, we look at it by category, not just in total. So we're looking at how much we're spending for accommodations, how much we're spending for food, entertainment, and travel, and we talk about it. So this is a pretty much an ongoing conversation about how much money we're spending and if we need to make any adjustments.
You know, and what's interesting is we never had these conversations, prior to our nomad life, and now we have them monthly, and it's kind of even a challenge. We spent $4,000 this month, but last month we spent $6,000. How much do we have left in the year, and can we make it? It's just it's kind of a game, and it's kind of a challenge, and it's just something it's like a hobby we enjoy now, is looking at these numbers and tracking them, and we don't spend a lot of time on them. We just pull down our credit card bills. Take whatever how Chase has organized things, and we just pull them from there, put them in a spreadsheet, and then look at the numbers. It doesn't take a lot of time.
And who would figure that the topic of money, which is the thing that people fight about most, is actually kind of bonding us together and bringing us together, because we've got these shared goals, we've got these shared expectations, we're planning together, we're budgeting together, and like Chris said, sometimes it does feel like a little bit of a game. And games are fun, and they're great for relationships. And
I want to talk about money with you forever, honey.
Talk about money. Wait, let's go in the other room. Talk about money.
Okay. Next week, we're going to talk about planning. Now, planning is probably the hardest part of full-time travel, and it can cause a lot of conflict. So, next week, we will talk about how to avoid conflicts when it comes to planning. So stay tuned, subscribe, ring the bell, and we will see you next week.